Well, head coach Nick Sirianni and GM Howie Roseman both met with the media today for the first time since the season ended, since the collapse, um, record breaking collapse of the Philadelphia Eagles 2023 season. What did they have to say, and what do I have to say about it? It's all up next on Philadelphia Eagles Talk with Geoff. Well, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Whatever time of the day it is you're listening to this podcast, welcome to Philadelphia Eagles Talk with Geoff. And where do I begin? We waited so long this offseason to finally hear from the Eagles brass and front office and get some answers from what happened and how they're going to fix what happened. And so, what I decided I'm going to do is play the press conference for you, and I will interject as we go along here and give you my comments and my thoughts on what is being said. Before I get started, remember there's an email address you can let me know your thoughts about the Eagles, about the press conference, about anything really. That is at petwgp at gmail.com. Again, petwgp at gmail.com. Let me know your thoughts. And while I have you here, make sure you follow and rate and all that good stuff with the podcast platform that you're listening to this program on. Really appreciate it. It does help out the show. Special shout out to Peter and Molly, a couple new fans of the podcast. Appreciate you listening. And thanks for being part of the program. Really appreciate it. All right, so without any further ado, let's get into the press conference. And like I said, what I'm going to do is just go through it from beginning to end. You'll hear the whole thing, and I will interject as I feel necessary to provide my commentary and feedback on what has been said. So without any further ado, here is the press conference from Coach Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman as they finally addressed the media since the epic collapse in the season by the Philadelphia Eagles. And here we go.
Appreciate everyone's patience. Just wanted to walk through why we're here a little bit later than normal. Played Monday night. The game ended Tuesday. I think we left locker room Tuesday morning. And just looking around the locker room at our players, as our staff, felt like there was a kind of sadness about the way the season ended. There was kind of a shell shock feeling that was going on. And I think what we do a good job of is kind of communicating, figuring out the reasons for things, how we can get better. And so we gave everyone Tuesday off. And then Coach and I and our coaches met with all our players. We had exit interviews. That lasted for a couple of days. Obviously, the snowstorm on Friday. So a lot of people were out of the office. The office was closed. And then we went into the weekend and, like we do, try to figure out a plan to get better. So I apologize for kind of the delay. And we're here now.
All right, before we get started, that is about as weak an explanation for them taking so long as I've ever heard. I don't believe really much of that at all. Now, do they have to meet with the players and all that at the end of the season? Absolutely. But they do that every year, and they've never waited almost 9 days to ever talk to the media. So, him saying that the team was sad and he felt that everybody was sad and shocked, and that's why they haven't talked. That's just a bunch of BS, if you ask me. What they've been doing the last week has been trying to figure out how to properly send a message to the media, how to properly and have a strategy as far as how to best respond to everything that's going on. And there's a lot going on behind the scenes. There has to be. When you collapse like this, it's not just one or two guys, it's a full organizational issue that went down here when you have a 10-1 record and lose 6 out of your last 7 games and are non competitive in most of them. So a lot of issues, and they're trying to figure out and navigate how to best address and answer them for the press. That's why they took so long to get in front of everybody. Just wanted to put that out there. All right. So, with that said, we'll continue on.
Can you walk us through the decision to remove Brian Johnson as your offensive coordinator? And did you talk to Jalen considering their relationship when you made that decision?
Sure. Yeah. We evaluated our season at the end of the year. Obviously, are going to be in constant evaluation of this. We did what we thought was best at that time, at the time, and I can't say enough good things about Brian though. He's a great football coach, and he's going to have another opportunity to lead an offense, and I will miss him. Some of the things that we want to do as a team is grow in a lot of different areas, and grow in some of the guys that have been in here with me have been there with me for a while. So it's about coming up with fresh ideas and doing some things different, and that's exactly where we are right now. And sometimes Brian being at that position, you know unfortunately he's the one that is leaving at this particular time, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate him as a coach. We've had a lot of success here in the past 3 years, and Brian's contributed a lot to that. But like I said, it's now about bringing in fresh ideas, some different thoughts than what a lot of the guys. Sometimes when you're with a group of guys, like we've been together for 3 years, that group of guys. But in addition to that, it was a couple of the other guys that I've been with for multiple years as well. And so just wanted to bring in some fresh ideas, and that's where we are with that.
So basically, what Nick is telling everybody is that he ran out of fresh ideas. And Brian Johnson ran out of fresh ideas. I mean, so he's basically admitting that they're inept as head coaches. So I don't know if that's even the case. Brian Johnson, I'd love to be a fly on the wall when he heard this press conference because he's the scapegoat in all this. He's clearly the scapegoat, him and Sean Desai. Now, I definitely believe that there needed to be coaching changes. I said that. I also said at the beginning of the season, my number one concern heading into the season was the fact that the Eagles had to have, a new offensive and defensive coordinator. And that was my biggest concern. And boy, did that end up being the main concern and the main issues for this Eagles season. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here, but I called that one. That ultimately was the reason for the Eagles' demise. And Sirianni owns a big part of it as well, and so does Howie. Howie did not build this defense properly. And we talked about that, the guys that he let go. TJ Edwards of the world. I mean, they had nothing at linebacker and really not much in the back half of the defense and safeties and corners. And that cost them dearly. So, but getting back to Sirianni, admitting that we need to bring somebody else in here with new, fresh ideas. That is, that had to be tough for him to say, but he has to say it because if he didn't say it, he wouldn't be the head coach of the Eagles. That, to me, becomes apparent as we go along with this press conference. The reason why Sirianni is still here is because he's willing to say that, and he's willing to actually fire his guys, let his guys go. As real, that's something that Dougie Peterson was given the ultimatum to, just a couple years after he won the Super Bowl, and Doug refused to do it, and that's why Doug was shown the door. Sirianni, on the other hand, was willing to do it, which is why the Eagles are keeping him as head coach for now. For now. Continue on.
With those fresh ideas, Nick, how willing are you to change some of the structure of your offense if you see fit?
Yeah, that's exactly what you're saying, exactly what we're talking about. So, it's just about putting the players in the best positions to succeed, but and doing things differently at times too. But there's going to be things that whoever the new coordinator is, there's going to be things that, they bring that are going to be, fresh ideas for us to help our players grow and help our players play at the top level. And there's been some things that we've done really well on offense too in the past that, that you'll mesh in some of that together as well. I think with some of the success that we've had these last 3 years and the things that our guys do well. And so I'm excited about that. The new ideas meshing with some of the old ideas. We'll see how that continues to go as we go through our off season process and where we land with that. But yeah, I mean, obviously, when you get to me, we got a little bit stale on offense by the end, at the end of the year, and these ideas and this new person coming in is meant to, take away the staleness and add the value of what they're adding to the offense.
Wow. Again, the more I listen to this, I'm just blown away. I mean, this is the reason why the Eagles were unable to get out of the rut that they were in. They were out of ideas. It's no wonder that they lost 6 out of the last 7 games and the entire league caught up on what they were doing on offense. And the Eagles were unable to adjust at all, which is why they were not only losing at the end of the season, but losing to bad teams and not even being competitive in some of these games. And the Eagles and Sirianni and the other coaches, their inability to make any adjustments or new ideas, as they put it, is so alarming to me. And this is why I'm a little bit shocked that they didn't fire Sirianni. They basically, as you'll hear, continuing on in this press conference, have basically stripped him of everything as a head coach. And they ask him here shortly coming up about what his role is, and he has a very interesting response to that. So, anyway, without any further ado, we'll continue on here, and I'll provide some further commentary, about the press conference here going forward. Just lost my feed here, so give me one moment. Let me get this back up. All right, continue on.
Clarification, though, it'll be your scheme, and you'll have final authority on what is run.
Yeah, it's our scheme. It will be our scheme of what we're doing. And so again, I don't know exactly what that will look like yet, right? We're bringing in a guy to bring in new ideas, to do the things that he's done in the past. We're going through an extensive search to get that right person. But it'd be crazy not to add some of the things that we've done in the past here as well. I don't know if it's going to be 95% this, 90. We're not there yet, right? We're working on getting the best guy in here for the job, and a guy who has a vision, a guy who's going to call the plays, a guy who's going to be able to coach a quarterback in the same sense there. So it's just about getting the right guy, and then we'll decide where that goes. But I'm hiring him to do a job, and to be in charge of the offense.
All right, so really quick, couple things. First, you heard him say it's our offense. Now, all along, and you may have heard it if you've been listening to the Eagles press conferences throughout the year, Sirianni has always taken ownership of the offense, saying it's his offense. His offense, everything goes through him. And so that's why the change in the language that he uses there now, it's being our offense. This is going to be our offense going forward. Again, they have stripped away Sirianni being able to run his own offense. Again, just something that sticks out to you when you're listening to how he's responding to these questions. Very interesting. Second thing is, and he's absolutely right, they got to find an offensive coordinator that not only comes in with fresh ideas, but also is able to fix our quarterback. Because Hurts continued to regress the entire second half of the season, especially. And he was not coached up. And that was one issue that I had in previous podcasts. You heard me say, are they not coaching up Hurts? He's doing the same. He's regressing, doing some of these same old habits that he was falling into that he did not last year, but the previous year, that he corrected last year. And he fell back into some old habits. And apparently nobody was coaching him up. And so that was an issue that I had. But that's the other key to whomever they do bring in here. They need a coach that was also going to work with our quarterback and get him back on the right track. All right, continuing on.
Nick, when you look at the defensive side of the ball, what are you looking for in your new defensive coordinator? Are you looking for somebody potentially to be a little bit more aggressive, or are you still married to, like, to say, the Big Fangio type scheme that you got these couple years?
Yeah, we're looking for the guy who's best fits who is the best person for the job, right? And that can be, there's many different systems that work. There's many different systems that work well. And we're looking for the guy who's going to be best for the job, that can utilize the skills that our players have, so they can play at their highest level. And so a lot of good candidates there as well. And that's what we're going through right now. As we speak.
Nick, if the offensive coordinator is going to be in charge of the offense and the defensive coordinator is going to be in charge of the defense, what is your role going to be?
The head coach of the football
what
team.
What does that entail? How does it change?
Yeah. I guess it'd be this very similar to what's going on right now. If that mean I'll sit more into defensive meetings at times, maybe, right? Instead of always being in an offensive meeting, maybe I go to a defensive meeting here and there. But my job is to be the head coach of the team, not the head coach of the offense, not the head coach of the defense, not the head coach of the special teams, but be the head coach of the football team. And so,
very interesting answer to that question. And I feel sorry for Nick to have to answer this. You even heard him say, I guess I'll be, he doesn't even know what his role is going to be as head coach. It's not clearly defined. It's a it's a tough situation to be in. It really is. I really feel for the guy. I like Nick overall. I definitely think he has some flaws. It's definitely on him, this collapse that the Eagles had this year. You can't get away from it as the head coach of the team. The onus is on you. And, it's almost like I feel like the Eagles should have just fired him. I mean, he has been stripped of so many of his responsibilities now. That's why that question was asked. What is your responsibility as the head coach of the team? And when he led off by saying, I guess I'll blah, 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 he doesn't even know, which is just a rough position to be in as a head coach. It really is. It's not fair to Nick, quite honestly. And this is why I don't know how this is all going to work out. Can it work out? This scenario that they're kind of going into here with Nick, as him just kind of overseeing everything, but I mean, he's not going to be playing, calling the plays. He's not going to be running the offense or the defense. Basically, it sounds like he's just going to be the one that talks during the press conferences and makes the calls on whether to go on fourth down or not, or kick the extra point or not, or it's just, man, I kind of feel for the guy a little bit, to be honest with you. Continuing on.
Well, that's building the culture. That's making sure the culture's, working, with our 5 core values, are taking every day at a time. Like, we're not coming up with new core values. We may shuffle of where the things are that are important, and the most important. But that's diving into that, building the culture, having a relationship with the guys on the football team. Because I know when I have that connection with the guys on the football team, that's when things are, that's when the culture is working, and working at high level. And then that's where our connection with the players and then their connection with each other works well too.
I agree with his sentiments on the culture, but what did the culture do the last month and a half of the season? So apparently there was some cracks in this culture that you're talking about, Nick. And I do think he puts a lot of effort into it. I don't think it's because of a lack of an effort, but this culture, if he was hitting on all these pillars that he's talking about, your team's not going to collapse like it did. So there's definitely some issues going on with the culture building that, he says he's still going to be responsible, going forward and doing. So something needs to be fixed there too. All right, continue on.
Let me answer a question. Let me take one.
This is Howie
just
coming in.
from a personnel standpoint on defense, where are you as far from being able to field the kind of defense you guys want?
Yeah, I think, Ruben, when I think about the contributions I can make to help this team, I know that when I'm doing my best, and I have my best seasons, this team has a chance to have its best seasons. And so, like, I hold myself to a very high standard. I think we have a lot of good young players on this team. I think we have the ability to go out and continue to add to that. I'm very excited about the core that we have on offense going forward, obviously. And so, in terms of that, our goal every year is to field the best possible team. And, I go back to last year on the Tuesday after we lost the Super Bowl, and Nick walked into my office and he said, "How you doing?" And I said to him, I think the thing that I'm most upset about it is how many good people we're going to lose, on and off the field. And so I knew what was coming. I knew the schedule was going to be harder. I knew that, it was probably easier to get the offense to a place quicker than it was the defense. And, we never want to be just kind of in the middle of the pack in both, And so I feel like a lot of the things that we try to do last off season was kind of try to keep our priorities intact about how we like to build the team. We could talk about that and some of the decisions we make. And, I accept responsibility for whatever we got to do to make sure that when the season falls short of not playing this week and beyond, I'm certainly responsible for that as well.
I would say defensive line in particular, what do you attribute their underperformance relative to the investment to, and is there anything about the way that the season played out that has sort of changed your roster building philosophy?
Yeah, I think you don't want. I feel like we've had a long history of success here, building a team a certain way, and I think maybe there's some preconceived notions that we're just at the linebacker position. That we don't care who we play at linebacker, and again, our two Super Bowl teams over the last 6 years, the linebacker play was good. From those guys, and I think if anything, it's my belief in the players that we have, the young players that we have. I have a lot of belief, and I know Coach does as well, in Nakobe Dean. And so I believe in the player. I believe in the person. We lost two linebackers at that spot, two good players from our Super Bowl team. And we had Nakobe wait in the wings. We drafted him for that role. Obviously, it didn't work out perfectly for him this year. That doesn't change the belief we have in the player. And then, we felt like we'd have the ability to get an off-ball linebacker, a will linebacker who can run and hit. And honestly, when you watch the tape, Zach Cunningham had a good year. He really did, and he had a mentality that we liked from that position. Of course, we missed some of the guys that left as free agents. Missed some of the guys on and off the field that we had strong relationships with.
Howie, what was your involvement?
All right. Few things I need to talk about here. Howie is, while he's saying he's not dismissing necessarily the losses, he had a chance. He directly had a chance to bring those guys back. He chose not to. So he's trying to tell us on one end that, he's responsible and he, he does pay attention. And he's trying to say that he's, this, he made mention of this remarks that are out there that they don't care who plays linebacker. Well, clearly you don't, Howie. And he's putting a lot of stock into Nakobe Dean. And you guys know that have been with me for a while. I said Nakobe Dean I see as the future captain of the defense on this team. I made that comment when they drafted him that year. I'm having my doubts myself. And if I'm having the doubts, there's no reason why Howie shouldn't be having doubts. I don't know if I really should say it that way. Who cares what my opinion is, really? I guess, I'm not the GM of the team. That kind of came out wrong. But my point is that I don't know what's giving him this confidence in what he's seen so far from Nakobe Dean. He has not been able to stay healthy. And when he's been on the field, quite frankly, I haven't been all that impressed. So I don't know what Howie's seeing, but it's not what I'm seeing. Now, it's still very, very, very small sample size. So I'm not willing to determine one way or the other about Nakobe Dean's future and my own belief in him as well. I'm still hopeful that he's going to be a heck of a player for this team. But he is undersized, which we know. And like I said, when he has played in the 4 or 5 games that he's played in his career so far, he has not been all that impressive to me. And he's been hurt twice. So for Howie to say, "Oh, we still got Nakobe Dean," who's still, just because he hasn't played that much and has been injured, doesn't change the belief and and all this kind of stuff that he just mentioned. Well, you know what? You're riding a lot. You're putting a lot of stock into this guy, and meanwhile, you let two uh, well-defined and very good players in linebackers walk out the door last offseason, and that hurt us big time this year. In T.J. Edwards and White that went to the Arizona, both of those guys, because you're White and T.J. Edwards, and he got lucky. He almost makes it sound like, oh yeah, well, our other plan was to bring in Cunningham. They got lucky to bring Cunningham in. It's not like he was a free agent. Nobody signed Cunningham. He was basically getting off this. They got him off the scrap heap just before the season started. Nobody wanted Cunningham. They got lucky that Cunningham actually played pretty damn well this year, and he was their best linebacker. They got lucky to get a guy that actually contributed somewhat pretty good football. He kind of faded down the stretch himself, but overall, Cunningham was a good signing. I'll give Howie credit for that, but that was pure luck. It's not like he was a free agent that they went after right off the, in free agency. They picked him up off the scrap heap just before the season started and lucked out that he became the player and contributed as much as he did. Or else our linebacker situation could have been far worse than it even was. So I definitely take some issues with Howie's responses there to that question. All right, continuing on.
In the process that led to Sean Desai's demotion?
Coach comes to me and tells me kind of what he's thinking. No different than when he decided to give Shane the play calling duty, and he said, "Hey, this is what I'm going to do. I trust him with the coaching staff. That's his responsibility, just like he trusts me with my front office staff, and that's how we're structured here. That's how the relationship works." And I always want to be a supporter for him and a resource. So if he needs me to do something, if he asks me a question, if he asks me an opinion, in a situation like this, he had made up his mind. He had made a decision, and I'm going to support him.
If you could go back and do that again.
All right. So if you missed the question, they asked him if it was his decision, essentially, or Sirianni's decision about the demotion of Sean Desai, which I said when this happened that there's no way this was Sirianni's decision, even though he came out and said it was his call. I don't believe that to this day. I don't believe what Howie's saying right there is being truthful. And, it's up to them how they're going to spin it. And I said they were going to spin it this way when it happened. And that's exactly what they've been doing. They're continuing to do it. And for sure, they wanted it to sound like, according to Howie, Sirianni came to them and made the suggestion to to demote Desai. It almost is laughable. Now, could it? I don't. I can't factually tell you that didn't happen, but knowing how this organization runs, I don't think there's any way in the world that Sirianni made that call on his own. And I don't even think he was the one that first suggested it. I'll go that far as well. But whatever the case, you heard Howie's response to it, and but I can't say that I believe that that's how it went down at all. So I'm extremely skeptical of that answer from Howie Roseman.
And would you do it the same way? Like, would you replace Sean with Matt again? And I guess whether you would or not, what did you learn from replacing a coordinator? Into, I don't know if it was December or not yet, but would you 13 games from the season?
Yeah, obviously, I understand that anything that I do, make any decision that I make, if it doesn't work out, you can look at it and second guess it. So we are right now. At the time I made that decision, like I've told you guys, I made that decision because I thought it was the best decision that for the team. And, obviously we all fell short at the end, at those last 6 weeks of the season, right? All of us did. And so, I say, obviously Matt was in a tough situation, trying to, because you can't completely change, the defense, right? And so he was, trying to, make some things happen with, quite frankly, things that weren't his defense. So I know I put Matt in a tough spot.
Yes, you put him in a horrible spot, and that's why it was a horrible decision. Now, here's another reason why I'm very skeptical that it wasn't Nick that made that decision. Because if, in fact, this is the truth that both of them are saying, that it was Nick's call, he made the decision, then, in my opinion, they would have fired Nick. He would not still be the coach. So to me, that just confirms what I feel about this, and that is that that Nick was forced to do it, and it was not his call because it was such a horrible decision. I mean, a pivotal decision made during the season that you can put a direct link to when this collapse really started falling off a cliff was because of that decision. This defense went from bad to the worst in the NFL because of that move. And all these losses to bad teams were directly because of that decision. That's what makes that decision a fireable offense. And that's why I can almost say with certainty, at least for me, I don't know this for a fact, that this was not Sirianni who made that call. Because if it was him directly, he would have been fired. All right, continue on.
I put Sean in a tough spot, obviously, but at the time that I did that, you know, I did it because I thought it was the best decision for the football team. And there's a lot of decisions I have to make like that. Whether I go for it on fourth down in certain situations, what our philosophy is in a 4-minute drive at the end of a game. And trust me, every time we do something like that and it doesn't work, I think to myself, what was the best thing? And I can only come back to that answer to you right now is that, and forevermore, that at the time when I did it because I thought it was the best thing for the defense and best thing for the team.
Last year, you talked about the vision that you had for the defense, things that you were convicted in, philosophically. I guess, has that shifted as you start this search?
No, I mean, you're always growing as a coach, right? So there's some things that, year in, year out, players that you have, different scenarios you go through, can lead to where your visions are and your philosophies are. But, those things are in constant they're evolving at all times. And so are there things that I still believe in? Even going through a difficult stretch here like we did, of course, right? And offense, defense, special teams, how to build, how to lead the team. There's a ton of those things, but I don't think there's any growth unless you look at some things and be critical on yourself and say, okay, well, this was my philosophy here, or this was a belief here, and this didn't work out. And sometimes the answer, you look at those things, and sometimes the answer is, no, I still believe in this. And sometimes the answer is, maybe I need to make a adjustment here with that. And so that's the process of just going through it and getting and trying to get better. And so, of course, there's things that I'll be adjusting, but there's still things that there's probably more. You don't just take just a 6-week stretch and say, boom, I'm scratching this entire philosophy. You look at it as a whole. You ask yourself, you drag yourself through the mud of the bad stuff that you've went through, and you say, do I need to to make adjustments? And the answer is yes a lot of times, and then the answer is no, this is the way it needs to be, and we just got to do it better or coach it better or whatever it is.
With the staleness of the offense, what are the things that you're finding yourself open to changing, and you maintain a lot of your staff to do a lot of the same things? So how has it been looking outside of that, and how with this situation and the offense, what was your confidence that instead of the entire ball that you could lead that?
Oh, yeah, first. Yeah, you go first.
Yeah, I think every conversation that we're having is about how we can move forward together. And I think the important thing for us to look at is before the stretch, which was a difficult stretch, not diminishing the 1-6 stretch at the end. We were 26-5 over the last 31 games. I mean, that's 4 times the amount of games that we played over this stretch. That is hard to do in the National Football League. That is hard to find a head coach in this league who has that record of success. I think we were 33-11 up until that point with Nick. We made the playoffs 3 straight years again. Not okay finishing 1-6. So I'm not sitting up here saying that, but it is hard to find somebody who can do those sort of things. And I think as we go forward, doing this together in a way that continues to get the best possible people we can on and off the field, for me, That's my job to try to make sure that we have that on the field, and my group is as strong as we possibly can get. And I know Nick's committed to that in his group.
All right. So that answer from Howie, I agree with, and is the main reason why I said last podcast that I predicted that the Eagles would not fire Sirianni. And I do think you have to look when you're thinking about making a decision to fire a coach. You do have to look at the overall big picture. You can't just take a snapshot. Even though this was as ugly as it could be, those last 7 games, they went 1-6 and lost to horrible teams, and played in oftentimes non-competitive football, just as bad as it can get. In all seriousness, which I thought and said was a fireable offense. Like I said, I would be okay if they did fire him over that because it was that bad. But at the same time, the reason why I thought that they would not fire him is because if we do look at the overall 3 years of him coaching, they went to the Super Bowl, fell a little bit short last year, and he's made the playoffs all 3 years, and they have a pretty good, it's really the number one winning percentage wise in the Eagles' history, him as a head coach. So, and plus from a PR perspective, again, when you're looking at how the Eagles are viewed and their front office is viewed throughout the league, they already fired Doug Peterson 2 years after he won a Super Bowl for the first time in the history of the Eagles. And to come off and now fire Sirianni after just 3 years and a year after he brought the Eagles to the Super Bowl, people would start wondering just what the heck's going on with the Eagles. Like, what do we have to do to keep our job over there? Those thoughts, are a factor, no question. So that's another reason why I thought that they wouldn't fire Sirianni. They would at least hold on to him for another year and give him a chance to fix it. But again, they're going to give him a chance to fix it in a very limited role because they've stripped him of so much power. So it's it's not going to be the same this year for sure for Sirianni and how the Eagles going to run their team. So anyway, we'll continue on. Here's Nick's response to that same question.
Nick, when you look at the
Actually, it
decision
looks
to
like it's
move
another
on from
question.
Brian Johnson, how much of a factor was Jalen? I mean, not necessarily like if you consulted him, but like just as far as making the change and the new offensive coordinator, like how much of a factor is he as far as all that?
Yeah, like I said, like obviously, we're always everything we're doing is trying to get our players to perform better and to continue to grow. So the new coordinator, if I'm answering your question right here, the new coordinator is obviously going to be heavily involved in not only he's bringing in a scheme to be able to run, to be able to for us to function in, and that scheme has to be something that our players can function and our quarterback is going to be excel at. And so I'm looking forward to the whoever that is to come in and do those things. As far as and you want there to be comfort with Jalen and whoever is this new coordinator. And so obviously just like I talked to Howie about it, just like talked to Kevin Patul about it, I'll talk to Jalen about that as well. And some of the things, you're in constant communication with your players, especially your quarterback. And so we'll talk through everything. I'll keep him aware of things that he needs to be aware of. And keep him in the loop of that because that he's our guy and it's really important that those two guys are going to work hand in hand to make sure that we're getting back to where we need to be.
If I can do a second follow up, just really quickly, did you have to consult with Jalen about your decision to let Brian go?
Yeah, obviously we talk about everything, and we communicate on everything. We won't get into specific discussions on what we talk about, but yeah, we discuss everything.
What was his reaction to Brian getting dismissed?
Obviously they have a relationship. I mean, you'll have to ask Jalen when you get an opportunity to talk to him. But anytime you have to let people go, we all hurt when we let people go. Every one of us, right? This is the worst part of the job, having to let people go. It doesn't just affect the person you let go. It affects the families, and it affects there's a friendship there, like that we have worked together every day for the past 3 years, and we've spent way more time with each other than we have with our families or our loved ones, and you grow close and you grow close bonds. And so, I don't even want to get into the what like everyone's gonna be hurting from this, right? Not just the guy that got let go, but the friendships that they're not over, but you're not going to see that person every day like you have in the past. And so that's the most difficult part of this business. I feel like if I can explain that on the human side of this thing, like that's the most difficult part of this business is saying goodbye to friends. And I can't. It's the worst part, and I really can't explain to you how it feels when you have to do those things, and everybody feels it, right? The coach to coach, player to coach, and so like I said, Brian did so many good things, and like how he was talking about the games that we've won, the success that we've had. Brian's a big part of that, and we're all sad for what's went down and what's going on right now.
Yeah, so that I believe is one area of this press conference where I think Sirianni was really speaking from the heart and being very genuine. And this is why I feel bad for him because he's being forced to fire his guys. Now, let's just be real here. And I don't really think that he would have done so if they just said, "Hey, we're going to run it all back this year and not fire you, and just we're going to put it up to you, Nick, to fix things." I don't think Nick would have fired Brian Johnson. I just don't. That's my belief. And again, these are his guys that he brought in, right? So it's interesting. It's interesting when you really think about it that way, and how Nick is going to navigate through this going forward. Um, that's the part that's going to be very interesting as we get into the off season as well as into next season. So something to keep paying attention to as to see how this is exactly going to roll out, and of course who they bring in as the next offensive coordinator. Continuing on.
What needs to be done? What needs to be?
It's atypical to wait this long to speak. How would you characterize those end of season meetings from your perspective? And did you feel you had to sell your vision or sell yourself in those meetings with Jeffrey?
Obviously we have those meetings after every year. And we talk about, the progression of the team, where we're going, what we did well, things we didn't do well. And, that was kind of business as usual right there. It was a little, obviously at the end of the game, right, on Monday night, you get back late on Tuesday. How he explained all that. We have player meetings, right? It takes me about 2 to 3 days to get through every player. Then you're trying to get through every coach. Then you're having the meetings there, and so it's a long process to get to where we are right now, where we have, we're able to answer your questions a little bit more. And so I mean, I guess that's with how he said what he said with the why why we're meeting right now. But going into the meeting, did you say what you asked again?
Jeffrey, did you have to sell yourself or sell your vision for how to fix it?
Yeah, again, it was the same. It was business as usual of how we go about an end of year meeting. Obviously what my thought is there, and so it was just normal, Zach. It wasn't anything different than it's been the last 3 years. Now, in my
There's no way that's possible. So he's either gets an Academy Award for acting with that answer and actually his demeanor because he looks like he's being honest, but there's just no way that's true. There's just no way the way that this year ended, that end of the year meeting was the same and normal as it always is. Just come on. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But I tell you, you look at his the way that he answers the question, and obviously you get the audio, so you're able to hear him respond to it. He does sound believable, but there's just no way that end of the year meeting with Larry was the same and normal as it always been. I mean, that's just beyond ridiculous. There's no way. If it was, they wanted to pull everything under the rug from Sirianni. I mean, so that's the real answer. So, I think Sirianni is just trying to save face here a little bit, which, in his position, he could find it understandable. But again, by no means was that just a normal end of the year conversation that he had with the owner. No way. because they clearly stripped him of the responsibilities we talked about earlier. So, anyway, continue on.
Mind, right? In my mind, you better believe I'm thinking, how do I reprove myself, right? I was a young coach that Mr. Laurie and Howie and this organization trusted to give the job to. I had to prove myself that, this guy can lead, the organization like they asked me to, and I had to prove myself from then. And I think that, you asked me that question, like, did I have to sell my vision? No, because again, it was business as usual. But you better believe that I'm thinking after that 1-6 finish, after starting the way we started and doing the things that we've done in the past, that I'm thinking I'm going to prove them right again. That and we're going to prove them right. Right? We got to reprove ourselves. We got to go prove it again. And so that's how I feel right now. That's how I'm attacking this off season. That's how I'm attacking this upcoming season as we get ready for it. Just hungry to be able to prove myself again to Mr. Laurie and the faith he's had in me, and Howie and the faith he's had in me, and the rest of the team and the city.
Can I just say something? I just want to say something because I think it's important, Tim. Something you said made me think about this. To think about these exit meetings and what the purposes of them are, and the purpose of them is, like everything we do, we're trying to accumulate information. For us to make good decisions, we're trying to accumulate information. But at the end of the day, the decisions are made by us. We understand that everyone has different opinions and perspectives, but we're going to make those decisions. So I say that just in relation to, you asked kind of what Jalen, and that's not fair also to Jalen. He's 25 years old, like Jalen is continuing to grow and get better. And what we see at 25 is going to be a bit different than 26. I'm just using Jalen as an example here. And so I think for us, it's also important to understand, like, we accept responsibility. Whatever the product is, at the end of the day, that's on me. That's on coach, and we accept that. So we don't ask the players to make these decisions. We don't ask the other people who work for us to make these decisions. We try to get information, and we try to make the best decisions we possibly can so that the confetti can fall on our head again and we can be world champs again, because that's the only agenda.
But in terms of improving Jalen, what needs to be done, Nick and Howie, and from Jalen himself, to get him back playing like he was in 2022?
Yeah, obviously we're all going to have things that we need to work on. And Jalen is no different than any. We all are going to have to look. We're going to all go look at the things that from the season and say, we need to work on this or we need to work on that. Without getting into the specifics of that, because like I said, we all. You guys are going to ask me, what about this? What about that? What the one thing I do know about Jalen is, when when there are things of his game that he needs to improve, he goes to work and he does it. He busts to do that. I think, you saw I think that there was a lot of questions after that first year about some things about could he be the passer or whatever the questions were. And he came out and put together an MVP type season the following year, in just the way he threw the ball, the way he delivered the ball, accuracy, all those different things. He just continues to grow. And I said it last year a bunch, I don't know if we know what this guy's ceiling is, because he's going to work and do everything he needs to do to get better.
Yeah, last year was last year, Nick, and this year was this year. And he was not the same player. He regressed quite a bit. Substantially is the word I've been using, because it is a substantial decline. I think there's a lot to do with it, including the coaching and the fact that he wasn't coached up and he was allowed to fall into some of these bad habits I've talked about forever that he corrected. I do think that he's fixable. I don't think this is a Carson Wentz situation, because I do think he's mentally strong, which I always said was one of his best attributes. So I'm not about to wave the white flag saying that he's been ruined. But if this continues, it will ultimately ruin the quarterback. It's happened time and time and time again in the NFL. So that's why it's so critical that whoever this offensive coordinator is that the Eagles bring in is able to fix and get Jalen back on the right track, because he will work to get there. But I think he needs to be coached up in order to get there again, because he's certainly not recognizing some of the mistakes that he started to fall into again this past season. All right. Just waiting to get the feedback again. And of course, you got a call coming in. Hang on one second. Sorry about that. Hard to do the show when I got a phone call coming in. All right, continue on with the press conference. Here we go.
And for 11 weeks this year, right? For 11 weeks this year, he was on top of the MVP talk, right? You guys asked about that, and then he was on top of the MVP talk of where he was through 11 weeks, and we all had a bad stretch through the last portion of it. In fact, there were games like even though we were in a bad stretch as a team, I thought Jalen was playing really good football. So but I get it. Like, me as the head coach, Jalen as the quarterback, we're going to draw the most scrutiny and the most attention and eyes, and we understand that in the seats that we sit in. But I know that the things that Jalen needs to work on, and the things that we'll sit down together and talk about, and I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to bust his ass to do that, because that's who he is. That's who he's been since the day he's got here. That's why he continues to develop in things that maybe people thought was a negative for him in the past, that he's made into a strength. So I have no doubt about the person doing that, because I've seen him do it. I've seen him do it over and over again, and I look forward to him doing it with this offseason, with all the things that we talk about for all of us to improve on.
When you look at what happened this past year, and especially with a lot of noise that were talking about Nick and possibly potentially replacing him from the outside, what gave you the confidence to bring him back for another season and to lead this team?
Because I've seen it been done. I've had the opportunity to work with him, and I've seen what he has done, winning games, put us in a position where we're competing for a world championship, putting us in a position where every year we're in the playoff race, and giving us an opportunity with the team to do that. Those things are hard to find. I don't know the stat off my head, but I'm sure there's not more than a handful of teams who've made the playoffs the last 3 years. And it takes all of us. We had a tough stretch. If you go back to when we walked off the field after the Buffalo game and we were 10-1, which, I've talked about that time machine. I would take a time machine to do that. That would be a beautiful thing, but we can't. I think there would be a lot different narrative being told, and we can't lose sight of the big picture. We have a lot of good people on this football team. We got a lot of good players. We got a lot of good coaches. We got a lot of good people in this building. I look around this building, I couldn't be more proud of the people. That doesn't mean we can't fight through adversity. That doesn't mean we can't overcome this and take this back to the level and beyond that we were at last year. It's not going to take a snap of the fingers. We got to work hard. We got to do whatever we can to have the right people, bring in the right people to do that. But we have a lot of those pieces in place. This cupboard isn't even close to bare.
Interesting response there by Howie. And there are times, and Howie's always had this nervousness with some questions whenever there is adversity. There's a lot of times he comes out with press conferences kind of like, joking around, kidding around with not only the press, but whoever might be on the table, press table with him. And then there's times when he's just very, very serious, and it's typically when they're going through adversity or they know they gotta face some tough questions. And certain questions, Howie has this nervous twinge in his voice. And when they asked him, the question was, why did they decide to retain Nick for this upcoming season? There was that response you just heard. He had that nervous twinge in his voice. So it's just something I pick up on. Otherwise, I thought it was a pretty good answer overall in terms of looking at the big picture again and the success that Nick has had and they've had with Nick. And not to just look at just that last 7 games, although as bad as they were, as we've acknowledged. Like I said, overall, I think it was a pretty good response. But again, he did it with this nervous energy and nervous twinge in his voice, which I just found to be, quite notable. Continuing on.
Robert just came out just now that said that Vic Fangio and the Dolphins parted ways, and that specifically the Eagles will be.
It's just like what happened when you had to do a press conference at one time. It's like just
Buyer trade.
what was it?
It was the buyer trade.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
It said specifically he will be the top target for the Eagles. I'm just curious if you can comment on that.
We got a lot of good targets that we're working through. And there are a lot of guys that have done really well in their interview process, and look forward to continue on that process. We'll see what happens.
Okay, again, obviously the news today, which I was going to talk about after this finished up with the press conference, is they're talking about Vic Fangio being released from the Dolphins yesterday. That happened, ironically, during that press conference. And the fact that, it was rumored that he would be a top target of the Eagles. Well, he was very much a top target of the Eagles because today he did sign on as the defensive coordinator for the Eagles. So we'll talk more about that after the press conference, but just to kind of get you up current status, he is now the defensive coordinator of the Eagles.
The assistant coaching staff, the coaches on your staff, all the evaluations been completed, or you think
we're still working? We're still working, yeah, and that's what's tough, right? You're still working, and there's some guys that are still up in the air. I hate this for them because we are replacing coordinators, and there's guys that are up in the air, and their families are up in the air in the sense of like, I got to get a coordinator in before we make a decision on maybe some of the quality controls or some of the position coaches. I know I believe in the guys upstairs. But also there has to be an ability for some of the coordinators to bring in, maybe one or two of their guys or more. And so that's still an evaluation process. That's something that might not get sorted out until the coordinator's hired, until that coordinator gets to meet with some of the guys, make sure they can work together. And so that's still a process that we're going through.
Over the years, you've been pretty consistent. You've been pretty consistent with us talking about the offense, whether it's, if Shane's here, it's your offense, calling the plays, Brian, it's your offense. From that change, that evolution, any encouragement come from outside, or is that something just coming from you?
Again, I just think that right now we just need to bring some ideas in from the outside, right? And we need to bring a guy in that with new ideas that's not part of this family of coaches. I think that's an important thing. Or even if it is a family of the coaches that has been somewhere else, and then it could be any of that. And so that's important. That's important, and because that's important that you're making sure you always evolve, right? And we are blessed with time, and that college coaches don't have sometimes because they're recruiting, and we're blessed with how much tape we're able to watch, how much tape we're watching on prospects, and we see the other college tape and things like that. So the evolution will not just be of the things that this new coordinator will bring to the table, as far as their scheme and things that we may not know a lot about, because it is easy to look out and say, oh, I like to do that, like to do that, like to do that, but not know everything there is to know about it. And that's why you're bringing a coordinator in to bring those new ideas. But then we're going to have this time over this next 6 months or 5 months or whatever it is to also study some own ideas ourselves. We'll go to a college. We'll bring somebody in here to make sure we're studying things that we want to learn more about, whether that's something we just want to learn more about, whether that's something that we were deficient in last year. Those will be all the different topics of what our professional development is. And then you also have the things from our offense that we've done well in the past. This will be our offense. This will be the Philadelphia Eagles offense, not whoever, name the coordinator's offense or my name on it or whoever, Kevin Patullo's. It will be our offense, and really look forward to, really evolving the offense and some things that I believe that by the end of the year, got stale, and we saw the way how that ended. And statistically, you finished positive on a lot of different things, but obviously at 1-6 finish, there was things that got stale. And looking forward to, I really see the beauty of what can happen with bringing in this new coordinator and where our offense can go because of it.
A couple more.
Why did the offense get so stale?
Trying, bro.
The quarterback.
We'll go Zach next.
I'm sorry.
I was saying, why did the offense get so stale? Was it because of the quarterback, the play calling?
We all have a hand in it. And I'll take in anything that happens on that field will always start with me. I don't care if that's offense, defense, or special teams. And so I'll be on the front of that, of where the staleness came from. But we did. There was things that we look at, and that we can do better, right? And whether that's the pass game, whether it's the run game, whether it's the protections, there's parts of that in all areas that we look at and be like, that wore its course. And that doesn't mean that's your entire offense. That's just portions of it, right? Because you're still going to have staples that are staples for you that can be run against any defense at any time, at any moment. That was just some stale moments of all of those phases of the game that I just mentioned.
What perspective do you have now?
Major stale moments. I mean, and the fact that they weren't able to make the adjustments is really the crux of the matter, and why all these changes were to be made. And I got to give the Eagles credit because at least they're aggressively making changes. Like everything they're being talked about at this press conference, the Eagles recognize changes need to be made. Now they're not firing a coach. I didn't think they would, but everything else is being essentially thrown into the trash and starting over. I mean, it really is, offensively and defensively. Personnel wise, we'll see what changes they make with the personnel. Got some potential retirements. Certainly, there's free agency and obviously a draft coming up. So we'll see how that's going to sort of relate to the actual players. But coaching wise, huge change. Pulling power from the actual head coach, definitely a change. And so that's really the good thing, is that at least the Eagles are not just running it back again next year without the same guys, because that, first of all, I don't think the fans would have they would have went ballistic. I know I would have if that was the case. But the fact that he was not able to make adjustments is really just unacceptable to me, you know. And he kind of plays it off like it's not that big of a deal. It was a huge deal. This collapse was because of that direct reason. All right, continuing on. There's one last question here for Howie, and then it's the end of the press conference. So here we go.
The roster composition. And you made a few references to wanting to keep playing this weekend, like a team still playing this weekend. How do you think it compares to the team still playing this weekend?
Yeah, I think we've always kind of had our own spin on roster building, and I think that at the same time, I've talked a lot about, if you keep following things as opposed to being at the head of the curve, then you're kind of getting the leftovers. Like, you have to be ahead of it, and I think that when we've had our best teams, we've been ahead of it, and so we continue to study that and try to figure out ways to do that. We study what's successful, what we think will be successful going forward, and I think in roster building, you're not going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. I think that, you could look at the 4 teams playing right now, and I promise you we can go over a couple of things they'd like to have back. That's part of it. The most important thing we got to do is we got to have a vision for how we want it to look. We have to have a process that we want to have. And sometimes you can have a vision, you can have a process, and the result's not what you want, and so you got to make sure that you're not overreacting to a result that, maybe just kind of was an aberration in the moment. And then you got to look at, maybe, is the process right? So I think just like coach is going through that, I think that's one of the things we're real about around here. How can we get better? What can we do better to improve ourselves? To me, we're at a point here where the only thing that matters is winning. That's the only thing that matters. The only thing that matters is for us to put out a product on the field that gives us the best chance to win a championship every year. And I know we can do that because we've done it. And we'll continue to work as hard as we possibly can to continue to grow and learn from any adversity we have and do whatever we can to overcome them.
All right. Well, that is the conclusion of the press conference. And so you heard the whole thing from front to end. And, hopefully Howie does learn. And he learns, number one, his biggest issues with me was the fact that he did not pay any attention to the linebacker position or have any depth in the secondary. And he made some bad signings, too. Signing Bradbury to a 3-year deal when that guy has lost all his wheels now. I mean, he is not even 1/10 of the player that he was last year. That's a huge concern. Letting C.J. Gardner-Johnson go. I know he was an expensive player to keep, but they certainly missed him back there in the secondary. But the linebackers is another major issue there. And offensively, you just got to get that offense straightened out. So a few things I just wanted to comment on here before I let you go is, and wrap up the show here, is the overall, I was a little bit disappointed in the fact that we didn't really learn a lot from those two guys. And I'm sure that they probably expected to have longer than 35 minutes or whatever that they were out there as far as the press and be able to ask some more questions. They were kind of cut off right at the 35-minute mark. So, of course, Howie and Sirianni, of course, wanted to make that a quick exit as much as they could. And I just thought a lot of the questions were softball questions. I wish they just asked more difficult questions. about the collapse more specifically, but they decided not to do that. And a couple other things. Again, I mentioned how Nick Fangio is now our defensive coordinator. So the Eagles got the guy that runs that entire defense. They've been using disciples with Gannon and Desai this year, and now they bring in the guy that created that defense. So, he is now the Eagles' defensive coordinator, and we'll figure out who's going to be the offensive coordinator. There's been some. The guy that I would like to have them bring in is Eric Bieniemy. Former Chief Chiefs OC under Andy Reid, and he was the OC for the Washington team last year. That's a guy that I would definitely be bringing in to potentially have him as the offensive coordinator. So I got other things I want to talk about, but we'll leave that for the next episode. By the way, the next episode we'll be bringing in a special guest, a friend of the program, as we know. It's been a while since he's joined us. That'll be Johnny, the Commanders fan, and we'll talk about the NFC East. We'll talk about the playoffs. There's probably only one team that has more changes going on than the Eagles, and that is the Washington Commanders. So we'll bring Johnny on next week podcast. So stay tuned for that. We look forward to talking with Johnny again. And with that, I think that's going to be it for now. So thanks again for joining the program. Always appreciate you listening, and hope you enjoyed that commentary through the press conference there with Howie and Sirianni. More to come. More news will be breaking, I'm sure. We're still got to find an offensive coordinator. We got a defensive coordinator. And we'll talk about Hurts and a few other things next episode as well. So looking forward to that. Until then, fly, Eagles, fly, and we'll catch you next time. Take care, everyone.